Welcome to Cross Culture New Mexico. I'm your host, Mark Tross. Please join us online at crossculturenm.weebly.com. Follow us on Twitter at crossculturenm and like and share our Facebook page, Cross Culture NM. We're continuing today with the rebirth of America, topic of the awakening of America. Two great spiritual awakenings in the land, one before the Revolution, the other after it, may have saved our young nation from calamity in its most formative years. President Calvin Coolidge once said, "America was born in a revival of religion." The preaching of Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield changed the spiritual landscape of America before the Revolution. As catalysts for what became known as the First Great Awakening, they may have also helped set in motion some of the very forces that eventually brought America its political freedoms. Jonathan Edwards, brilliant of mind and spirit. Most historians agree that Jonathan Edwards stands with Benjamin Franklin as one of the two outstanding minds in the America of the 18th century. Edwards entered Yale at 13 and graduated valedictorian at 17. As he grew in his Christian faith at Yale, he became somewhat of a mystic, in the better sense, in his quest to know more of God. Said Edwards following his conversion, "God's excellency, His wisdom, His purity and love seem to appear in everything, in the sun, moon, and stars, in the clouds and blue sky, in the grass, flowers, trees, in the waters, and all nature, which used greatly to fix my mind." Edwards fell in love with prominent young Christian lady Sarah Pierpont, who was noted for her charm, her flashing wit, and a joyous repartee. She proved the ideal pastor's wife for Edwards, who took over his father-in-law's prestigious pulpit in Northampton, Massachusetts, 2 years after their marriage. Jonathan and Sarah Edwards eventually raised a remarkably fine family of 11 children. Edwards came to Northampton at a time when spirituality was at a low ebb. The conditions he describes among the young people might sound much like conditions of today. Licentiousness for some years greatly prevailed among the youth of the town. There were many of them very much addicted to night walking and frequently frequenting the tavern, and lewd practices wherein some by their example exceedingly corrupted others. Then revival began in 1734, while Jonathan Edwards was preaching a series of sermons on justification by faith alone. Conversions began, first the young, then their elders. A notorious young woman was saved. It was like a flash of lightning to the young people. There were those who agonized and those who rejoiced. Wrote Edwards, in the spring and summer following the 1735, the town seemed to be full of the presence of God. It never was so full of love nor of joy, and yet so full of distress as it was then. By 1736, Edwards's church had 300 new converts, and news of the revival had spread throughout New England. George Whitefield, the voice heard by thousands. Took a new surge when George Whitefield arrived from England in 1740. For 2 years of evangelism in America, Whitefield had already risen to prominence as a key figure in the Wesleyan revivals underway in England, a great movement of God there triggered by a group of Christian students at Oxford University. In those days, evangelists did not enjoy the advantage of microphones, but Whitefield didn't need one. At Bristol, England, he had preached to 20,000 at one gathering, and all could hear. In America, he preached to 5,000 on the Boston Commons and 8,000 at once in the fields. Sinners in the hands of an angry God. In New England, the revival reached its peak in 1741, and it was in July at Enfield, Massachusetts, that Edwards preached his most famous sermon, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Some modern critics have passed this off as the religious fanaticism of an earlier era, yet Edwards does not deliver this message in what some might describe as hellfire and brimstone style. It is said that he did not raise his voice nor even move his arms. though his typically good diction and enunciation made every word ring clear. As he hammered home the judgment of God, point upon point, each listener felt impact of his own guilt. Was this really the same Jonathan Edwards who spoke so frequently on the love and grace and beauty and majesty of God? Yes, because Edwards became convinced that one could not really understand the great love of God until he also understood the awfulness of sin. There was such conviction of sin that day that Edwards had to wait some time until the congregation quieted down. He finally prayed, descended from the pulpit, and discoursed with the people. They closed with a hymn and dismissed. During little more than 2 years, from 1740 to 1742, some 25,000 to 50,000 people were added to the New England churches out of a total population of only 300,000. The movement changed the entire moral tone of New England for the better and justly earned the name of a Great Awakening. Spreading fire, awakening in the middle colonies. It fell to others to spread the revival from New England into New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the middle colonies. God chose men like Gilbert Tennant, whose father, a Presbyterian minister in remote Neshaminy, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, single-handedly schooled Gilbert in his own home to be a minister. He built a log cabin in his yard to use as a school, where he taught Gilbert, his younger sons, and 15 others the languages, logic, theology. He also imparted to them an evangelical passion which sent them out flaming evangelists. Gilbert Tennant, his brothers, and their handful of dedicated young associates saw conversions wherever they preached, and revival began to spread throughout the middle colonies. Some of the clergy looked down their noses at William Tennant's log college and branded his graduates half-educated enthusiasts, but Tennant may have had the last laugh. 2 of them eventually became presidents of Princeton. Revival reaches the South. Meanwhile, the revival spread into Virginia and the southern colonies in 3 stages. Samuel Davies, one of the Log College graduates and later president of the College of New Jersey, Princeton, planted the first phase. The preaching of Baptist Shubal Stearns and his brother-in-law, Daniel Marshall, both products of the New England Awakening, spread the revival like wildfire into Virginia and North Carolina. Devereux Jarrett, an evangelical Anglican turned Methodist in spirit, fanned the revival's 3rd phase in the southern colonies. Suddenly, Methodists, like the Baptists, sprang up everywhere. Circuit riders spread the good news, and Virginia, North Carolina became the cradle of Methodism. The Second Great Awakening. Such movements of God were not to be the last in the history of early America. By the close of the 1700s, the nation, it seemed, was headed again for disaster. Thousands of colonial Americans, until then clustered mostly along the eastern seaboard, began to pull up roots and head west through the Cumberland Gap. Conditions at the time did not exactly produce a territory of churchgoers. Once out into the frontier, many left their churches behind. Life became tough and rough. Morals declined. One writer describes the scene aptly. Come liquor flowed freely, gun and rope settled far, too many legal disputes, the West was crowded with thieves and murderers, with neither courts of law nor public opinion to raise a rebuke. Sexual sin abounded. Christians who cared about the souls of men and the future of the country saw the peril. If such a spiritual drift should continue among the thousands of settlers already in the Alleghenies and beyond, it could bring down the judgment of God upon the entire young nation. Yet only a thin system of trails and waterways connected the colonies with that vast wilderness beyond the mountains. Humanly speaking, it seemed impossible for godly men to change the course of events. But God intervened in a mighty movement now known as the Second Great Awakening. Thousands were swept into churches, more than 10,000 in Kentucky alone, between 1800 and 1803. The event surely helped reverse the spiritual skid and saved America from calamity. Where and when did the Great Western Revival begin? Birth of the camp meetings. Most historians pinpoint Kentucky's Logan County about 1799, when several Methodist and Presbyterian preachers joined efforts. Soon word of a mini revival spread. Kentuckians came from miles around. The crowds grew, and soon visitors had to camp out for 1, 2, or 3 nights. Men chopped down more trees to accommodate the crowds and arranged split log benches to create a church in the wilderness. Great meeting at Bourbon County's Cane Ridge in August 1801 climaxed the fervor. It extended over several days and drew crowds estimated as high as 15,000, an incredible figure in view of the scanty population at that time. One historian describes this vivid scene of an early camp meeting. The governor of our state was with us and encouraging the work. They are commonly collected in small circles of 10 or 12, closely adjoining another circle, and all engaged in singing Watts and Hart's hymns, and then a minister steps up a stump or log and begins an exhortation or sermon, when as many as can hear collect around him. Another describes the impressive scene at night. The glare of campfires, earnest prayers, sobs, shrieks, shouts. It was a time that many families, and especially children, never forgot. The high emotional pitch of the meetings triggered no small controversy, especially among staid clergy of the East. Despite admitted emotional excesses, the revival movement spread and had a profound effect in transforming the lives and morals of Western society. Thousands were swept into churches, more than 10,000 in Kentucky alone between 1800 and 1803. The revival and its impact eventually spread beyond the Kentucky borders, but camp meetings took on more dignity. They became well organized, and the camp meeting established itself as a legitimate Protestant innovation that helped bring the gospel to the masses. Its format, in fact, laid the foundations for the later campaigns of mass evangelism that still typify 20th century evangelicalism. You've been listening to Cross Culture New Mexico. I'm your host, Mark Tross. Join us online at crossculturenm.weebly.com. Follow us on Twitter at crossculturenm, and like and share our Facebook page, Cross Culture NM. Next time we'll be talking about without microphone or television.